Hello, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, very nice to meet you. I'm sorry for the delay. We had some technical issues to solve and try to fix them still. Normally, Rob would introduce right now here. I think he is not on stage so far. At least I can't see him. Rob, if I just don't see you, tell something, say something. No. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar in the name of the NGI and German Institute of Public Administration. My name is Carsten Berger. I'm a research fellow at the German Research Institute for Public Administration. And together with my colleagues, I will guide you through the webinar, which will probably last about 90 minutes, maybe just 80 minutes from now starting. We will have a panel discussion, which is very much open to your questions. We are looking forward to them and to integrate them. First, we will start by presentations of our speakers. And before we really quickly start, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our four really great experts today. First is Loretta Anania. She works for the EU Commission since already 30 years. She served in different R&D fundings, in total in 7 consecutive EU framework programs. For that, she has a lot of experience to share with us, from a lot of insights from the European Commission. She has a background in math and holding a PhD, which dealt with digital transformation in information societies. Welcome, Loretta. Nice to have you on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you. So Rob had an electricity problem today. And if you've watched the news in Texas, you know this happens everywhere. So I will start by repeating what Rob said in the invitation to this seminar. What he said is that without a clear vision on digital identity, society will lose agency, since the capacity to produce future value, which, as we know from the figures, is based on the data economy, the real-time economy, the prediction algorithms, all of this will be out of control, in particular for the states, which are losing control over what was previously data that was held. I mean, I'm from Rome, so if you go on Capitol Hill, you still find 2,000-year-old Roman documents. You know, the Rome was like the US, they like census data a lot. So I have recommend to you, because I think the reason we're having this workshop is to ask you all to reflect whether you agree or not with that. And in a personal capacity, this is just my own, I'm not representing the EU here, I actually believe that. I believe that states no longer have control over the data. And in particular, I'm Italian. So during a crisis, there was the government released some funds to help citizens who had no income. And after 3 months, the citizens and SMEs were still struggling with another paper document, a notarized form, 3 different apps, 3 different emails, 3 different, I mean, I myself can't remember any emails anymore. So I think the situation is really demanding a lot more efficiency, okay? Now, from an EU perspective, my role here is to say that I have been funding under the Next Generation Internet a project on self-sovereign identity, and I was really happy to meet the Germans, Karsten and Helmut, and because these were the original authors of papers that I had read 3 years ago without understanding them, but finding them very intriguing. And I spent about 2 years reading up about SSI. So now I'm funding it through the ESSEF lab. I've met Daniel of the EBSI. So we have a number of projects open, and the reason we are here is to ask you if you have an idea to how to solve this trust framework, this missing element in the end-to-end internet, which makes life really difficult for those who don't have data, because as we know, foreign powers have a lot of data for private use. And the mission creep that I'm seeing with tracking everything at a time when the Commission is asking everybody to be carbon neutral by 2050, which in my digital part of the world means really changing my attitudes towards centralized green servers. You know, we are changing very rapidly, and so I think this is very timely workshop on this. So if you have any ideas, go to the www.ngi website. And if I have a little more time, I will go into what is important, okay? What is important is that we have a huge asymmetry of power and a huge asymmetry in the use of data, in the access to data about us, okay? And this asymmetry is profoundly disempowering. So the European Commission gets a lot of requests from citizens, from NGOs, and also from the Parliament to try to rebalance these asymmetries, which are profoundly disempowering. And so we do have some success stories, and let me try to put in my 2 slides. Poof. Yeah, share. Gail, can you do that? Or how would I, this share a video, share a PDF. I don't have it in PDF. I have it in a different share screen. Let's try that one. No, sorry about that. So I have some slides on what I consider the way to go in terms of safeguarding digital identities. And as you know, here it's come up. Okay. So as you know, Angela Merkel and Ursula von der Leyen, with the new commission, they announced an EU new identity. Okay, so that is really something that the whole commission will have to deliver in the next year. In my view, I see my slides. Do you see them?
Yeah, we can see them.
Okay, so they've been jumping all over the place without my touching anything, which shows how intelligent the system is and how humans are getting more and more stupid. So in Europe, privacy, dignity, and security are fundamental rights assigned to each individual citizen. Okay, these are articles in the treaty. DG Justice is involved. And the treaty is 64 years old. So of course, with digital, some of these technologies are going faster than regulation can keep track. But we do have, in my lifetime, some big success stories. I remember the choice of browsers was something that our units worked on. The effort to put transparency everywhere, and also in the safeguard of democratic institutions, identifying the source of misinformation. This is a very active area now. The GDPR, which used to be, I mean, I remember the internet governance, Americans asking me, why are you Europeans so obsessed with privacy? Well, it turns out Californians are also equally obsessed with privacy, and the word obsessed has disappeared. And this has become really one of the success stories, which, however, is very early. So the implementation, the courts, that has not started. Norms, social norms, how to act on the internet without bullying. These things need time to evolve as a society. They're not top down, they're really bottom up. We have a number of efforts on AI ethics. And I think, again, these things will take some time. All of them are policies that, in my view, entitle citizens, but also need to entitle states and entitle businesses to use the digital single market. So that's where the policy initiatives in RDG are. And I suggest that Europe, although we complain a lot, which I think is good, and I see an ecosystem very complicated, which means that there's a lot of SMEs on blockchains, there's the INATBA, there's a lot of different opinions. we're very happy that you can come in at the beginning. There still is no standard. It's pre-normative, pre-competitive. It's good to be in at the beginning and understand where the politics is going so you can make up your own minds. And what I said is relative to other countries, and we're very happy to have Australia here today as well as Germany. We want to do an effort that is global, a global trust framework, because the internet doesn't stop at the border. So yes, NGI is what I mentioned. It's the name of our unit. And as you know, the internet was based on end-to-end. And as we patch it, as the internet gets older, security is really lacking. And it's very, very hard to have an end-to-end control. So one of the things that my unit is pushing is the investment into an infrastructure. I call it NGI, but you could call it information infrastructure, that gives you the safety and security online, without which people will not trust. And without trust, we can't make all the achievements that are necessary for society. So my last statement says that we've seen a movement from federated identity to currently self-sovereign identity, which is what my project is building the infrastructure on. And what comes next, and now this is Rob's idea, the idea of disposable identities, which is like a ticket to ride. So you enter the bus and they need to know that you're not a terrorist by your face or bio or whatever, but this is only one limited attribute verification, and it ends the moment you step off the bus. And I remember before the GDPR, the article group, the Working Party 29, the idea started with stopping keeping all of your search terms for a year, and then it went, to 9 months, and then 6 months. These were the affordable data protection. We really need a lot more. We really need a lot more analysis of the data policy, and I can speak about different forms of data. The ones that I think still should belong, like Loretta was born in Rome, that belongs to the public anagrafe, and SSI has a trifurcated system. And we want some sort of structural separation so that we don't end up recreating even bigger monopolies that we see today, which are so disempowering in the balance of power of citizens, of states, of businesses, and of foreign interests. There are too many conflicts of interest. So I must say, I'm a believer in regulation. I think that's my last slide, and I'm very happy to have questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Loretta, very much for this overview from the European perspective, or from your personal perspective working in the European Union, and for also naming the challenges, which we will discuss after the other speakers had their time to presentate. I'm pretty sure we can come back to them and also take the questions from the audience and bring them into it. The next one would be Helmut Nerenheim. I'm very happy that you made it the second time to this panel and to take your time again to discuss with us the German perspective on it. I will just really briefly introduce you, and then the stage is very much yours. Helmut Nerenheim, you're serving in the Ministry of Innovation and Digitalization of the Federal State in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is part of Germany. There you lead the IT coordination as well as a federal working group and initiatives in the area of blockchain in German government. He is also the leader of the blockchain coordination project of the IT Planning Council and also the initiator of the Digital Evidence Network community. Helmut, the stage is yours. Show us what Germany is doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carsten. I have some slides. Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Not
yes,
yet.
Right now.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for being the second time in the NGI webinar. My name is Helmut Nierenheim. You have introduced me, and I want to say, talk about SSI, self-sovereign identity. Here we go, and especially what's happening in Germany. No, so if we talk about self-sovereign identity, we come from an old version of or when we start about digital identity. I think you know that in this we have an old version, isolated identity providers for social media, car sharing, e-government, and our new idea is to give the citizens this central point of identity, the so-called SSI client. So with this client, it's our idea of the self-sovereign identity. We can go into portals from government, car sharing, social media, and so on and so on. That's the big idea of self-sovereign identity. And I hope that you will follow my thesis. You can read now. We need a global universal identity layer for all types of identities, for example, natural persons, but also IoT devices, built on open and interoperable standards. And the SSI, the self-sovereign identity, can become successful. That's a really important point. If citizens, public institutions, and businesses understand its potential and build up trust into this novel infrastructure, because it's new, and new is always to be is it good, is it not good? So we have to make a trust in this novel infrastructure. It must be transparent and interoperable. It's very important, and it needs an infrastructure people can trust. Trust is a very important thing in preparing new infrastructure concerning identities. In the small group, maybe Daniel, you remember with Daniel Dusseuil and Rieks and Kai and Franz van Ette and others, we have defined some benefits. What is the benefit of self-sovereign identity? And we presented those benefits to the EU Commission in the European Blockchain Partnership sessions. One benefit is reduction of waiting time in the administration, because I'm talking about public services administration, from weeks to minutes, because we have a digital identity. Social benefit is especially in healthcare, education, social welfare. And we mentioned that we have a saving time in KYC processes. That's not only KYC process in the public services, but also in banking and other KYC processes. Empowering citizens to control their data. That's a really a topic which is really important because I'm in the control of my data, and I can decide whom I give my data in, what kind of use cases I have to show it. So the user control, the centralized of my data, and not only my identity data, but several certificates as the so-called verifiable credentials in my smartphone, can be presented, and I'm responsible, or I have the decision whether to share my credential, yes or no. Give an identity to the undocumented. That's for me a very important thing for refugees, because they come without paper and they need a digital identity. And with this SSI approach, I think we can help those people without papers to give an identity. The complexity of administration forms can be reduced. I think you will accept this point, because I don't have to fill out my name, surname, address, and so on in several forms. Compliance with GDPR is a very important thing. We have our regulations, and that must be solved. Clear. More security. That's the so-called SSI triangle. I don't want to go very deep now in this concept. Maybe you can read something in the internet about this triangle. The issuer, the owner, that's the people, and the verifier, and that's in whole gives the trust for self-sovereign identity. Now I want to go a little bit deeper into what is happening in Germany. There is an innovation competition of the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, the so-called Showcase Secure Digital Identity. There are 3 projects being funded for the next 3 years with a capacity of 15 million euros for 3 years. And I'm belonging to a project and as an associated partner, and this project is calling ID Union. I will give you some overview about what this ecosystem based on SSI called ID Union is planning to do. First, you see this in this slide a part of the partners. I think now we have the number of partners have grown. We are, I think, only over 13 partners, and all these partners want to do something about SSI in different pillars and different topics. And as you can see, there are a lot of banking. There are industry like Siemens or like mobility like Deutsche Bahn, and so on and so on. And I think we have a big consortium, great number of partners, and the number of partners is important in order to bring the SSI solutions we are preparing to build in productive environments like Bahn or where else. That's how now I show you the pillars or the use case areas we are preparing. First, on the left side is the e-government public sector. I'm bringing some use cases from my responsible to education, financial, industry is important, and maybe you read the words Gaia X, this great European project. Gaia X and SSI are working together. Commercial mobility, instant asset messages, and e-health. I think you can imagine if we always have a solution, and SSI solution on all these areas. There's a big approach in say SSI is really live, and SSI is on the road. In some focus points within this ID Union project is the interoperability, and sure you'll see this ASIF sign on the left side. So we want to work together with the European Commission's European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework. We have some municipal bodies and here and some generation for everyday relevance. You can see these the topics here, and especially the cooperation is important to be aligned to international, national, or European and international working groups. That's very important for us. So we're building something new, something with a broad, very broad scope of areas, and in my opinion, I think it will be a little bit revolution if all those use cases go live. One very important, and that's why I'm very happy about it, that the SSI idea is at the highest political level in Germany. In the picture you see in Germany we call it Bundeskanzleramt, at the ministry where Angela Merkel resides. And there is a solution which I remember this year will go live. So are the project ideas, and the project idea is the hotel check-in. Sorry, it's a German slide. I didn't got the English translation. The idea is that that people from some companies who want to say, yeah, we want to participate on this project, get a so-called master ID, an SSI ID from the Bundesdruckerei. They get a credential from the company, that's the so-called Firma in Germany. And with these both credentials, I'm my master ID, so my identity, and with the confirmation that I belong to the company, I go to the hotel check-in and can make this the check-in process without filling out the paper. I think everybody knows that you have to fill out the paper if you want to go to the hotel, to check in a hotel. And this project is very simple but complicated enough, and I'm very happy that, as I said, the highest political level in Germany has realized the ideas of SSI. And I'm very interested in the final of this project, whether it has a good, I hope so, it's a good is accepted by the employees who are using this. So the last slide is important, the European solution, and I think we will hear something about the ESIF, the European Sovereign Identity Framework. And as I always say, I'm the founding grandfather of ESIF, and I think Daniel will maybe talk about more detail about this European approach. So the very last slide, there's a lot to do, just do it. So we have a lot to do, work to do to bring such new infrastructure to the people, the trust to the people. And I think it's a good thing, and we have to do our work and do it well for the citizens in Germany, in Europe, and maybe all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helmut, for giving us these insights from the German way of solving this problem. You just mentioned that you are working very much together with the European Union, or that there is a lot of cooperation. That's why I want to give the floor to Daniel. Of course, not to forget that we have a wonderful perspective from the other side of the world, from Australia by Julie afterwards. So first, maybe back to the European perspective. But before you start, Daniel, I would kindly ask, or I'm very pleased that the chat is already very viable. There is a lot of traffic in there, and as you see, Gael and Michael are already a little bit moderating in the chat. So I appreciate very much if you take part in this discussion via chat, in order that Michael and Gael can bring the questions afterward, after the presentations on the panel. Thanks so much to you all who are participating. First, Daniel, the floor is yours. You are the convener of the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework within the European Blockchain Partnership. And you have lead a lot of projects in this context. I make it very short on this because you are the best to introduce more or less yourself and your problem. You're not your problems. I'm very sorry. Your projects by yourself. The floor is yours, Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much, and happy to be here, and also get the first introduction from the grandfather, indeed, from the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework. So perfectly aligned. I'm trying to share my presentation, so it's a bit uploading. So in the meantime, so as Carsten mentioned, I'm indeed the convener for the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework within the European Blockchain Partnership. And that partnership is a partnership of different public sector organizations, different governments in the European Union. Okay, I see that my slides are here, where we want to establish a blockchain infrastructure that offers and supports different transformation of cross-border public services. We saw that, like in Germany, in Netherlands, and different countries, this initiative started, and the governments wanted to work on this together. But of course, it's not only about having that network established, that infrastructure established. It's also mainly more about deploying use cases. Yeah? And at a certain stage, of course, use cases are even more important than the network, because we not only went to notarization of documents and trusted data sharing and diploma management, but we also included how can this network support that emerging aspect from the European self-sovereign identity. Yeah? So sovereign identity is, of course, much bigger than the trust anchor that blockchain can offer in decentralized way. So we try to see how this can work and how we can support those kind of things. I'm not going into deep dive in these kind of slides, but as Helmut already presented and also Loretta mentioning, there is now an emerging new paradigm to handle identity. So we see this already happening in the market. So I'm going to give you a brief position where ESIF is positioned. So those are the things that are already happening in different sectors in different countries. What we as ESIF want to do is to actively involve governments in this new paradigm, in this new process. To have also all those credentials that governments own for the citizens, controls for the citizens, manage for the citizens. Depending on what position that you have towards government, you're going to name it or frame it another way, but we want to involve them. So not only as issuing parties, but also as relying parties. And of course, many governments throughout the world, they have something that what they call the base identity. And there's also a very important credential that we want to hand over to the citizens. Of course, when the governments want to enter, they want to have it in a standardized, interoperable way. Always very afraid to go into a very specific login or very specific technological approach. We want to be open. So it's up to the citizen to decide who I'm trusting with my wallet, and then enter those credentials what I need to have. So that is very important. We have standardization, and of course related with it's already mentioned several times in the chat I see, also related with our trust framework, which is eIDAS. So how can verify credentials, verify identities go in towards that identity framework? And of course, what we also want to see, not at this stage, but at a later stage, and I come back what Loretta mentioned, we need also to regulate this context. A wallet will be a very important context for citizens, where he interacts with different parties. So you need, of course, also to protect the citizen debt. So we need to see how certification compliancy rules are being set, not to control the citizen, but also to protect them. Because if not, you end up with something where you put all your valuable information in towards it, and then you have certain people that on a bad way interfere with that. So there's also about how governments are looking at those kind of things to see how we can protect our citizens and our users and do that. What we also do in ESIF, and one of the last slides, is also we build the necessary trust ledgers or the necessary anchors to have certain information also stored in that. If he shares a credential, how can you know that it's not tampered, there's no change? And that's why we offer, and we think that based on that blockchain infrastructure, you can have an independent layer to easily check those kind of things. Now, not going into that, ESIF is an open framework. It's not a network, one network that rules them all and will be eating up all the rest of the self-sovereign identity networks. No, it's something that is in combination, is interoperable, or needs to be interoperable with different things. So we interact, of course, with the citizens. We want to interact with public sector, but we see that our framework will be also interacting with other private sectors and even including other ledgers, where we're going to have compliancy rules that we want to define, secure anchoring specifications, the linking between eIDAS and SSI, validation of the public services, and also support those issues and trusted checking of all those kind of things. Now, at this current stage, just to mention, we are now approaching what we have called version 2. Version 1 was more the test and pilot environment. Version 2 was more approaching to our production session. And now we are engaging with specific member states and specific partners of them, like Helmut is one of them. So Germany is also, and North Rhine-Westphalia is one of the early adopters, to see how can we implement this. We have now built a theoretically model, a production environment, but how this is linked to the real world. So we have now established the early adopters program, where we see, okay, how the first adapters will be implementing things towards our deadline of March 2021, and then we can help and onboard other things. Yeah? Mainly from the public sector approach, but of course open to different solutions. Yeah? And of course, coming back what already Loretta said, we are now looking at from in the European Blockchain Partnership and the member states, but a big opportunity now arises because Europe wants to rethink how they treat their e-identity. Now, it's not to be said that the new European identity will be SSI based, yeah, but at least I think we can inspire that new approach and see how to link. Because if you read some extracts of the speech of President von der Leyen, you can already distillate some SSI concepts. It's about control of the personal data, having the ability not to track things by big platforms. Yeah? Also reshare that goes at things and adding trust. Yeah? So if you read that synthesis, we could provide from in the SSI community an answer to this. Yeah? And see how we can protect European citizens and in a broader global context. Okay, if you want to learn more, but we share this information, I try to be as open as possible on our specifications, on our interactions. We have stakeholder meetings, we have the early adopters meeting. So we want to see how we can position ourselves. And that is a question that I always have. What is the position of ESIF towards all the evolution that's happening in the countries, in the different commercial players? So this is an evolving target, so we are always open to discuss those kind of things. And I think this event is also perfect to see how you're reacting and what your expectation is towards us and so on.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for this information, and as well for this call for participation in finding the best solution. And by finding the best solution, we can also look abroad, far away in the world. Precisely in this panel to Australia. Julay Cook, you are the representative of a country which is very far to us, but nevertheless pretty interesting. So I'm really looking forward for your information about Australia. You are the acting head of the Digital Identity Program within the Digital Transformation Agency of Australia. And you're also responsible for key elements of both the Digital Identity Program and e-government, including strategy, element, communications, policy, and legislation. Thanks for joining our panel here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Carsten. And again, thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you this evening. I think someone was going to share my presentation, if that's okay. But today, I guess I just want to give you a bit of a short overview on the work that we've been doing in the Australian context. So the Australian government has been building a digital identity system for the last few years, and just wanted to give you a bit of an update on where we're at with that, and how we're progressing, particularly with things like our legislation. We just go to the next slide. I think I'm talking to the converted here, but we firmly believe that digital identity offers a simple, safe and secure way for people to verify who they are online. The system that we are building is intended to create your digital identity once and be able to reuse that again and again whenever you need to prove who you are online. We've done a little bit of work to try and build the case for digital identity to secure funding from the federal government over the last few years. And in building that case, we've identified that the way that the fragmentation that the way we approach identity verification in Australia at the moment, we believe is costing us up to around $11 billion per year. Our goal is to develop a whole of economy solution that opens the door to online services across both government and the private sector. So you can see there's a bunch of numbers. We've been building the foundational elements of the system, as I said, for a number of years, but it is up and operational right now. We've got over 2 million Australians that have created their digital identity. through the government's MyGov ID identity provider. You get there that those identities are being used to access over 75 government services right now. They're linked to over 1.2 million businesses across Australia, and they're supporting around 120,000 transactions per day. As I said, there we've at the moment we've only got access to government services. We've got some legislative barriers. That means that we need legislation to expand the system. But as we progress with legislation, we will open up not only to having a range of private sector services, but also having a range of identity providers, so people have the choice who they create their digital identity with as they move through the system as well. Let's move on to the next slide, thank you. As I said, we've been doing a lot of economic modelling to understand the really tangible and financial benefits that we believe digital identity provides. And this is just one example that we think is pretty powerful, particularly in the Australian context. So this describes, I guess, a family that has been impacted by a natural disaster. So if you think of a bushfire event, that sadly we have all too often here in Australia. We see that if this family, particularly in a regional area, lost their identity information, we believe if they had a digital identity, they would save up to 4 hours in time saved in applying for replacing identity documentation, up to 4 weeks to receive that identity information and that their identity documentation back in their hands, and around $128 in avoided costs. But I think importantly in this scenario, what we can show the power of digital identity is that even though they might have lost their identity documents, if they've got a digital identity, they would be able to use that to access immediate access to critical government services and support. So we think that that's a really powerful example, I guess, of a really practical way that digital identity can support all sectors of the community. The next couple of slides will go through, I guess, how our system is set up. And we've taken a lot of the elements of the self-sovereign identity philosophy, but we do have a federated model that I'll get into a bit later into the next slide. But overarching the whole program is our Trusted Digital Identity Framework. So this is an open framework that's been created with some really strong principles around consumer choice, privacy by design, and has also been built to be interoperable with other systems. It sets the standards, the rules, and the guidelines for participants within the digital identity system. We've got really high standards in the TDIF, and they range from things like usability, accessibility, privacy, security, risk management, and fraud control. As I said, it's currently being used as the overarching policy for our digital identity system, and we have been very mindful in developing the system, reusing a lot of the international best practice standards to facilitate interoperability as much as possible. So things like EIDAS, ISO, NIST, OpenID and SAML are all based within TDIF. We have been working with our private sector. We know that whilst we're developing a government digital identity system, we know that there are other digital identity solutions that are being developed across the economy. And we've been working with our private sector and international governments as well to understand how we might have elements of mutual recognition internationally. And we've been working specifically with Singapore and New Zealand on that. This next slide is probably a little dense there, but I guess it basically shows the elements of our federated system. So you'll see on the right there, we've got the relying party services. On the other side, we've got the identity service providers, so the people that people choose to create their identity with. And in the middle, we've got the identity exchange. And I guess what we see the exchange providing is that it acts like a bit of a switchboard, transferring information with the consent of the user between the relying party services and the identity service providers. It's privacy enhancing and means that only information that you choose to share with the service that you're accessing is shared, and only as much information to prove what they need to prove about you in order to facilitate that transaction. We've got a bunch of other components of the system. You'll see there the document verification and the face verification services. So they are already existing government data stores that we are able to verify documents and credentials against. Later on in the next few months, we'll be rolling out our highest level of identity proofing capability. We're calling that, it's our IP3 identity proofing capability, and that will be able to completely replace the need for people to present in face-to-face in shop fronts, and be able to do higher value and higher risk transactions entirely online. And we're able to do that by being able to biometrically match the person that's accessing the service with the data that's already held by government. It's really important to say that we're not creating a store of biometrics, and that the biometrics are only used on a one-to-one matching basis, and they're only they're destroyed once the transaction has been completed. All of the participants within the system, aside from the relying parties, are required to be accredited under the Trusted Digital Identity Framework, and they're required to undertake an annual assessment to make sure that they continue to meet those high standards. And then the last element that I'll talk about in terms of the system itself is our oversight authority. So this is our governance body that at the moment is an interim body, but it looks after the day-to-day operation of the system. It monitors security, fraud, manages any of those incidences, and into the future will be responsible for things like operating a charging framework as well for the system. As I mentioned, we've got some work to do in terms of legislation, and we're using that for I guess three really key elements. One is to establish a permanent governance arrangement. So the interim oversight authority that we have at the moment, we want to establish a permanent governance body to help regulate the system. We need legislative authority to expand the system to our state and territory services and also to the private sector. So that's what we're also using the legislation for. But really importantly, we've heard from our privacy advocates and from the community that whilst we have a lot of the privacy and security consumer safeguards within our policy, we've heard that to make sure that people have trust and confidence in the system and have I guess trust that the system is not going to change without a level of scrutiny, we're enshrining a range of those privacy protections and security protections in legislation. And we think that's something that is really important for us to make sure that we're operating within the social license and make sure that we've got a community who uses the system and trusts the system. So we've been consulting on our legislation. We had our first consultation process late last year. It finished up just before Christmas. We received 44 submissions from a range of government, private sector, peak bodies, industry groups, and the general community. There's obviously a range of varying views on some of the elements that we're putting into the legislation, but what was universal in the submissions was the value of a digital identity system, but also importantly, the importance of making sure that some of those privacy and consumer safeguards are embedded into legislation as well. So we're about to embark on our second round of public consultation. We're expecting to do that in April, and we'll have a third round of consultation in the second half of this year, ahead of introducing the legislation into the Australian Parliament. We're expecting to do that by December this year. Just to, I guess, close off, I hope that you've learned a little bit about what we're doing here in Australia. We've got a lot of work to do, but we've got some really good momentum and great support from our government providing funding for us for the next 2 years. We see that there is enormous benefit to both Australians and the Australian economy in having a trusted government digital identity system that people can use to access across the whole of the economy. You can find out more on our program, including the progress on our legislation at our website, which is on the screen there, digitalidentity.gov.au. And we'd really love to hear from you if you've got any specific views on any parts of our program or as our legislation progresses as well. Thank you very much for, thank you, Carsten.
Well, thank you very much. I will take over now, Michael. Thank you so much, Ms. Cook, for your very good introduction. I think after this round now, we see that there's a lot of people and a lot of organizations working on the same topic. And one of the goals of this webinar was to bring these perspectives together. So we see there's a lot of happening in Germany on the European level and in Australia also. And I think and we hope that these people will collaborate to find the solution, which is most in the interest of the citizens. What you have talked about last seems also to be a highly interesting topic in the chat, is the whole topic about legislation and regulation. It's also what we are working on at the German Research Institute of Public Administration, is basically what is the legal side of it, which kind of regulation do we need to enable SSI or digital identity. In the European Union, this has been so far eIDAS regulation, which has been the first draft, and I heard some rumors that there is some plans to have some follow-up on eIDAS, and we would love to hear more about that. Also, not just the legal aspects, but also Philip in the chat has always stressed also multidisciplinary approaches. I think eIDAS is maybe an approach like this, where it's very much between somehow legal regulation and technical standardization come together, so a new kind of regulation can also be observed. So we'd like to ask Loretta about what is planned about eIDAS, and also I think we would like to hear a little bit more from Ms. Cook also about what happened in Australia. What is the legislation about, and what is the differences that you see between the European approach and where can we come together? And as a third person, I would also get in Daniel, that you kind of see more from the technical view, how is the approach that we've seen from Australia different and the German one, to kind of wrap that up for us. So this is what I propose, Loretta, then.
So I start. So if Helmut is the grandfather of SSI, we have the father of eIDAS, Andrea Servida, who has been greatly supporting my work, which was in the funding of the ESIF SSI project. So I worked with the other unit, which is in Luxembourg, to make sure that my project would build a bridge to what already exists, not to duplicate and to use existing. What he told me is that, and I know him over 10 years, that it took 10 years for us to recognize that if Italy accepts my passport as an Italian, which is verified, Germany should also accept that passport and not re-verify it, because they would trust the Italians to have equally verified. Now, this took 10 years as the digital signature. You must know that during COVID, the use of internet has gone 20% up. And the use of digital signature is something that I now do every day. Okay, so I'm really thankful for that work, but don't underestimate that it took a long time, that you need to have at least one node that is interactive with all the others. Some member states have 3, others are barely. So, you know, with 27 member states, each sovereign, it's difficult to get simultaneity. Although everybody agrees and everybody has signed, and the status will be announced very shortly, I think in 1 month, and we're going to have a workshop with them to when this comes out. What has come out is a study on how to update eIDAS, and what the Commission does is always have a consultation. And so all of the people in my projects, and I was very happy to hear that Helmut has 3 projects, one of which is also working with Gaia-X, because these are people I know, because I've been in the framework programs 30 years, okay? And the Commission it started with coal and steel, okay? Trying to get France and Germany not to fight one another. And the key word was engagement, meaning if you're engaged in code, I'm going to use one of the questions. Larry Lessig said that there's 4 levels. There's laws, there's social norms, there's the market, like the single market, but there's also the technical code, regulation by code. So if the technical people who are so active in some of our projects get together, they give advice to the eIDAS unit on what is missing, okay? Now, back to Australia. So the Australian government was very kind to invite 4 neuroscientists. I was one of them. There was a medical doctor, a marine scientist, a telecom person, that was me, and an IT person, that was the Esprit. You know, IT and telecom were separate once upon a time, which shows, you know, this was the 5th framework. But Australia was the first country to have an SMT agreement, which would allow all of your projects to participate with ours on selected areas. And mobile is something really important for Australia because of its wide. Now, yesterday, I was listening to all of our 5G and 6G plans. As you know, I'm a research at heart. You know, so I'm, don't ask me about regulation. I'd rather fund projects to discover new things at a time when they're rapidly changing. And Ericsson was giving a fantastic presentation on self-driving cars, okay? And the kind of infrastructure you need. And it turns out that in Australia, they didn't work like they did in California because of these kangaroos. And because I was one of the SMT scientists in Australia, I said, you know, although Europeans loved kangaroos and pandas, I was told that kangaroos are a nuisance because there are too many of them. So you should have gone ahead with that project and had some free hamburger as a result. No, I mean, obviously, Australia for us is like a really exciting place. So again, the SMT agreement, you were the first to sign. So I have big interest in international cooperation. We have put in cooperation with Canada, Australia, and a couple of other, Korea. That's in the future funding, in the next generation, whatever it's called, the big money, big money. Now, I wanted to just answer 2 questions, which I think are really good from the chat. The first one comes from Thorsten Dittmar, and he says all is currently blockchain based, so the issuer can't be a human being, and for all customer-to-customer networks, that would be crucial. So I think that's a really good question, because I came through this with listening to all the blockchain. We funded like 20 million worth of blockchain for social good, and some of the winners are in the audience because I recognize their name. Thank you. When I went to these meetings, it turns out that they were mainly permissioned and not permissionless like the end-to-end internet, because of this missing layer to the human. So I think your question is a really good one. And the only answer I can give is that as the Commission, I am not pro-SSI. nor pro-blockchain nor against blockchain. But these sort of sub-code religions are constant battles, because the eIDAS unit has a study and my project wanted to go there, but they were only accepting blockchain, and they complained. I said, why are, and I explained that that unit has to fund blockchain, we have to fund this, eIDAS have to fund, that we can't fund everything at the same time. In my project, when I went to Andrea, my project was only SSI, and people said, oh no, you should open it to all. And I said, no, the evaluators chose to focus. If you have a lot of money, you can do everything you like and test. But if you have very little money, to focus on something and test it is actually the better way to go. The only thing I insisted on is that they open also to individuals. Originally, it was only to SMEs. Why? Because you can send a proposal in this area with a 2-page. It's not our proposals, 3-year big money. These are 200K proposals, 2 pages. So if you have a good idea, I rely on the excellence of the judge in the project to get it funded quickly. We have about 75 million on data portability, on a number of very different little NGI holes. The other question is by Vladimir Kuparinen, he said we should avoid biometric-based ID on the excuse that other credentials can be easily lost or stolen, like blockchains or bitcoins, when using the right to service authorization instead of identification. So I completely agree with that. Now, this is my own position. In most cases, we don't need identification, but the right approval verification process, which is why I started and ended my slides on disposable identities, plural, being a ticket to ride. I need a ticket to ride the plane, and I need to be verified that as a legitimate use. But outside of that, I want data minimization, essentially, because it's a twin transition. So I think these two were very, very good questions. And I hope I've answered as best I can. On eIDAS, that's not my unit. So come to our next session. We'll invite the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta, for these words. I will hand the floor directly to Julie in order not to lose or to give all of you the time to give proper answers.
Thank you. I will just add onto that, Loretta. We've got different identity proofing levels for exactly that reason, that depending on what type of service you need to access, you might need to give a little bit of information, and depend if it's a higher risk or if it has a financial transaction related to it, we expect that those identity verification processes should be higher. And that's where we would be looking to introduce the biometric matching. But yeah, we've got different levels of identity proofing for exactly that reason. And I guess the other thing that we are using digital identity and the attributes that go along with the creation of a digital identity is how that can then be used to support finding your account at the other end of the service. So making sure that if you're dealing with, say, the tax office, making sure that you don't have to remember how much tax you paid last year or what your tax file number is, to be able to match you back to your record within the system as well. So we think that there's, as long as that information is passed over with very clear consent, and as long as the users can see what information is being passed over and why, we see some great value in that. But Catherine, I think you wanted me to cover off a little bit more on our legislation. So as I mentioned, there was 3 key reasons that were for us pursuing legislation. One was expanding the system beyond just our Commonwealth relying party services. The second was that establishment of that oversight authority, but also, as I mentioned, making sure that we've got those privacy and consumer safeguards lifted up out of our policy and into legislation where people have got a lot more confidence about what the system can and can't be used for. Our program has at times received some bad press around linking it to, one-to-many matching and government, I guess, creating a store of biometric information that can be then used to track your behaviour across services. We've been really clear that that's not what we want to do. Our system won't create a single identifier to be able to track behaviour across systems, and the reason we have that identity exchange in the middle of the ecosystem is to support that minimisation of data going back and forth between the identity provider and the relying party service. And whilst we've been really clear in our policy on those things, there, I guess, has always been the concern from the broader community that we could change our mind quite quickly, and there's no real process for the community to have a say in what we're doing with that. So I guess what we've tried to do with the development of our legislation is embed and enshrine those safeguards into the legislation. As part of the consultation process, there were a few key things that were emerged as key issues for people. Privacy and safeguards was definitely one of them, but also things like what is the scope of the legislation? So, as I've mentioned, our Australian government is building the digital identity system, the Commonwealth system, but we know that there are other, particularly commercial providers out there that are looking at the same solution, and they're getting great traction at the moment. So one of the elements of our legislation will be, will it cover just the digital identities created in our system, or will it apply to all digital identity systems that are in operation across Australia? Our early thinking on that is that it will apply mainly to our the digital identities and the transactions created in our federal government system, but that other entities can choose to be accredited under TDEF or choose to opt into the legislation, I guess, to show their consumers that they're providing a certain level of protection. I guess the only other thing I would say is that we've got a lot of the key principles of things like self-sovereign identity that have been built into our program. So things like choice, consent, privacy, security, integrity, all of those things are really key to how we've designed and continue to operate the system. And we're using the real life examples of as I said, over 2 million Australians using the system to make sure that those design principles are consistently applied as the system scales up.
Thank you very much for this view from Australia. I think it's very important to have this international and interdisciplinary thoughts on this topic, and maybe we can keep working on this and see what we all learned. I would like to ask Daniel also on this regulatory question, because I think you are working on establishing the architecture of a very progressive technological solution on this. But what is regulation? Is it an obstacle for you? Does it give you enough room for it? Is there need for reform? How is your view on that? And what did you learn from
as government regulation is an obstacle? I will not do that, of course. That's a bit of a strange question. No, but of course, we work in a certain context, and that context is evolving. Yeah, so regulation also needs to see how this is moving. Yeah, but I see a lot of people talking about the eIDAS, and of course that is very, very important, this topic, but it's not the only one thing that we are looking at. The new eIDAS regulation will be is now in revision, so we're trying to see how this can be evolving, that decentralized concepts can also be included. We had an elaborated study to do that, to see what kind of things are possible, but many things were already possible within the current regulation. So were the things that on a structural level that needed to be changed. So that's a thing. But what I'm trying to say is, it's not only about the eIDAS, you have also GDPR, you have all the others, the digital sovereignty, all those kind of other policy areas that are also important in this aspect, including also social and economic aspect you need to include. But it's of course a big aspect that you need to change together with all partners to see how this can evolve. So we are working this not only ESIF is not only a technological project, it's also including how those other aspects need to be tackled. It's about the transition that we need to go towards and what are the necessary rules. I see, but it's also a bit my personal opinion, that you will need some more regulation to, I already mentioned, protect that citizens. Because it is a new responsibility that you take. I take the parallel aspect as in payment. You have also a bank account. Your bank account is heavily regulated. Why? Because you don't want to lose your money. And the identity wallet, to mention that, you will also need regulation. Why it is now possible and even unregulated that everybody can steal your identity, correlate those kind of things. I don't see that as a normal situation. So we need to regulate those kind of things so that we have a normal situation to have it. And that is why Europe is heavily investing in those kind of things to see that. There was also a question in the chat to say, okay, can private sector play a role in that? I truly believe that, but it will be in a regulated sector. That you cannot do whatever you want with those kind of identities. There will be rules on those kind of things. What you can do, what kind of exploitation of data you can not do anymore. There's those kind of things. So the regulation and the technology is evolving, and there is a constant discussion on this, and it's a good one. And we don't always align, but we need to keep that dialogue constantly evolving, and things influence each other towards those kind of things. But I completely agree, as Loretta has mentioned, this is a long transition. So don't go into saying, okay, when will this be implemented? I see there's on political level, there is some eager to announce, okay, the new identity will be happening. But as you have that many players, that many countries that need to evolve, this will be a gradually thing. But I think the momentum is there, that we have initiated this thing, and the ball is now rolling. And you need to keep asking the right questions, asking the right things to see if this is going into the right direction.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. I would like to ask, involve again Helmut also. You introduced also the consortium that you're working in at the moment.
Yes.
And we can see that it's an interesting mix of public and private actors here, which are mostly trying also to solve some technological problems. But what's the role of regulation there? The German eID that we have at the moment is considered to be quite safe, but also not much used by people. It's getting a bit more. What is the role of the law in this and from regulation, or is it just just things that, as you said, we just need to do it without adjusting regulation? What's your point on this? What did you? What does it have to do with ESSIF and the European reforms that are coming up now?
So I fully agree what Daniel said, because in Germany the eIDAS regulation and GDPR are the regulation we have to involve in our solution. That's clear, and. Especially for Germany, it's really important that we define a so-called level of I missed the word.
Playing field?
Level of help me, please.
Assurance.
Sure. Thank you. The level of assurance, because when we use an identity solution, we have to make out what kind of trust we can build, and if we are more than substantial, then or more than normal, we have to be aligned with the German regulation, and that in Germany the BSI, the Bundesamt für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnik, will prove whether our solution has a level of assurance substantial or more, and I think that's the biggest biggest point or biggest topic we have to solve to and to make clear that our SSI solution in ID Union is eIDAS compliant, is GDPR aligned, and has a substantial level of assurance. That's our big topics we have to solve. Sure.
So it's more a problem on regulation, which is not by law, but it's rather by adoption of standards onto the EID, if I can summarize that.
Yeah, maybe on law that's clear because the identity solution is not a law by the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, but the question of the federal republic in Germany from the federal ministry, and that must be aligned. And therefore, I'm very happy that with the hotel check-in solution, with this small use case, this topic is not only North Rhine-Westphalia, not only in the ID Union consortium, but it's on the level of a federal ministry in Germany. Yeah.
So Loretta also wanted to add something, if I understood right. I just want to say we have 7 minutes left. I would like to have a short statement by everyone for the end. Loretta, you first, and then...
I just wanted to reply to Daniel and Helmut and the question. The question was customer to customer, but in fact, I read it wrong. It must have been citizen to citizen. So sorry about that. And so what Helmut just said is the key. So the key is in the detail. And in the project, we have technology readiness levels and security levels, which vary by use cases. And that was developed over the years in eIDAS. And these are exactly the important items. But also, speaking to what Julie just said, the most important thing in the digital twin transition is to make citizens aware, okay? Citizens aware of, there's a new campaign now, Safeguard Your Face by Access Now, you know, or Safeguard Your Biometric Records. There's a lot of skills in having people understand what their verifiable credentials are and what is acceptable or required in different situations. So these are the important details which together with the research projects we are finding out. And research, like the case of the Tesla cars or Google cars, which didn't take care of kangaroos, there's also the case of Chinese AI beating American AI because they had data on Africa, which allowed them to recognize different color faces. So that's why we need international collaboration and research. There are areas that are still research, but you don't just do research, starting from nowhere. As Helmut said, we are building on these details of security level, verified credential awareness by citizens. There's a lot of different components. So I'm really happy to have a few more years with some research funding that if we join these different research projects, and I think we can make more progress together since views differ. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta. I would like to ask Danielle for some wrap-up questions also concerning the chat or some thoughts, and then I'd like to ask Julia afterwards, Ms. Cook, to give us your outside perspective also. This has been, mostly a discussion being from Europe. What is the thing that you have learned for yourself listening to this, seeing this? Where do you see the similarities? And then Gael will have the finishing sentence before we turn.
Maybe I have only one sentence. My sentence would be, my vision is not to log in with Google or not to log in with Facebook, but to log in with SSI.
Yes.
Full stop.
Thank you, Daniel. Please share your wrapping up thoughts with us.
It's called after this word, Helmut, to do that. No, but I think we need to think about this as in a big ecosystem where different partners come together on behalf of the citizen, but at the end, the citizen needs to be protected in there, and it's the main role to enforce them. And it will be about changing roles, changing organization, changing role of a government. So it is a big discussion. Yeah? And we are just at the beginning of this because at the end, we don't have big implementation of SSI at this moment. So the first use cases need to be productive, and we will learn a lot of those kind of things, and then we need to evolve. So bear with us. This is a transition, so be patient, but we also be ambitious to enter the scene.
Thank you. So all the way to Australia and then to Brussels.
Thank you. We've been, I guess, watching from a distance, I guess, the progress that's been made on digital identity, particularly across Europe, and tried to take the lessons and the learnings from the programs as they've been developed. We think we've got a good mix, but we've still got a lot to learn. I think the importance is making sure that we've got consistency, not necessarily having exactly the same rules and regulations, but having consistency where we can, and leveraging off those already developed standards, so that we've got the best chance, I guess, of having interoperable systems, particularly at a policy level, to support hopefully one day technical connection where my digital identity in Australia can prove who I am across the world there in Germany.
Gael, we can't hear you.
It's still the microphone problem from earlier, Gael, maybe. So, okay, then we would have loved to hear your final words on this. We've reached 12:30. We had a very vivid discussion. We learned many things. We see that we're working on this internationally. Let's collaborate further and work with technologists, multidisciplinary. Thanks for the discussions in the chat. It's very interesting research, and politically it's interesting. A lot of it is going on. Let's keep on the topic, and have a nice lunch break.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.